Hello everybody, today we're going to be reviewing the new John Doyle video, the unpopular but correct take on Ukraine, Russia, and the American decline. This is going to be a feature-length Doyle Hegoff commie upload, so I'm not going to be watching the entire thing, but we are going to look at the clips and examine them for what they are, my disagreements with them, and a bunch of other things that you guys should hopefully find entertaining. And first we're going to start off with his thesis statement for the video,
which is that I literally do not care about it in the slightest, and there's actually no reason for American patriots to care about it in the slightest. And this is not because I'm apathetic towards it, but rather because I actually understand it very well, which is why, if anything, I'm probably more sympathetic to the Russians, actually. And if you disagree with me, you don't like my position, if that position angers you, don't write to me anything angry. It would actually be a better use of your time to just write a letter to the State Department in which you congratulate them on the effectiveness of their propaganda. And I'm
right there. So you're starting off saying, oh, I don't really care about the conflict, and that is completely fine. It is not your responsibility. Obviously, it is in another continent. Like, it doesn't obviously affect your life personally in a way that is going to change it in any particular way. I get that. But for you to say, oh, well, if you care, it's because of the propaganda. You got to think the propaganda. What is this with the sarcastic, passive-aggressive bullshit, John? Like, really? Like, why condescend people like that? Do you think that's going to convince people of the right thing? Like, who are you trying to impress here? You have a ton of impressionable, like 15-year-old white kids that are probably watching you. And I don't want them having that sense of humor when they grow up, right? To be all sarcastic and just being an asshole. For what reason exactly, okay? Please, come on.
I'm saying this outright, again, because I'm really not interested in wasting anybody's time. And these last few weeks have really vindicated that belief I have that something like 95% of people aren't even real people. They don't have agency. They're NPCs. And I've tried having this conversation with people who I used to respect, and it's literally not possible because nothing they're saying is like an actual argument or even something that can be maybe better explained with additional context. No, it's literally just lies. It's the understanding of global politics that is the caliber of a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, they can only conceptualize geopolitics like they're used to seeing in cartoons or movies, where there's just this madman and he's just gone mad with power and he's going to take over the world and blow us to bits. It's not even worth engaging with. So save us both the time, because if you're upset about my position on this, not just that you disagree, but you can feel yourself become upset by my position. It is 100% because you've been consuming the mainstream media propaganda, which we can't forget is...
Okay, so you're going to say, you can't disagree with me, and if you do, and if you're upset, it's because you are, you're brainwashed and you're retarded. It's like, well, then why even meet you halfway? If somebody disagrees with you, nobody's going to go on to your side because you're being an asshole to them to begin with in the video. So again, he's only preaching to the choir, so what's the point of you doing the video? Right? If everybody agrees that Vladimir Putin is justified in taking Ukraine, and that in some like fourth dimensional chess way it helps America by us looking bad and all this, then go ahead and do that. But you're clearly not getting any new viewership insofar as you're not convincing anybody of anything. Why? Because you're antagonizing them from the start. You're already saying you're retarded, the media brainwashed you, you know nothing, you're an NPC. Well, nigga, like, how am I supposed to believe you then? Completely ineffective, okay? What is this messaging, bro? Completely retarded. All right, let's go ahead and go to the second
care
clip.
About this, along with so much more, so do stay tuned. But before we even get into what's happening and if anyone should care about this, let's just leave that as neutral right now. We have to at least acknowledge first that this seemingly overnight consensus has formed that it is the morally correct position to be outspokenly in support of Ukraine right now, right? I mean, think about it. Like, who in your day-to-day life ever mentioned Ukraine as recently as 2 months ago? But now I would wager that everyone in your circle has probably brought it up to you, or maybe you felt compelled to bring it up to them and they've got an opinion on it, maybe you do, etc. The point being that this is the grandest display of what's being referred to now as mass formation psychosis or groupthink, people being sheep, being lemmings, etc., that we've ever seen. Because even with something like Black Lives Matter, you know, that dates back to 2014. It took a while for it to become like a household name or a household discussion, or even with the pandemic. There was a build up to the peak of it, and it was actually originally a left-wing position to not buy into it because they thought that Trump was trying to like manufacture this crisis in order to stay in power. So we at least have to appreciate this in terms of like the just complete government and media consensus, complete domination of all narratives, and proportion of subscription and engagement from the general public. This is probably the greatest example of this phenomenon in history, largely.
So I'm trying to get to a clip where he's talking about the supposed mass formation psychosis of the liberal media tricking people into caring about Ukraine. And so I'm a minute into the clip and he's not gotten to the point. So while people might say, oh, well, John, you know, he uploaded a 2-hour video. It's like, well, 2/3 of it is filler. Get to the fucking point, dude. Really? This guy doesn't have a script, apparently, right? He's just articulating what he's rambling. Okay, and so he has like a bullet point and instead of like, I'm going to talk about this, which is fine. But generally speaking, if you want to make a good video, you should probably script it out. I'm not going to script mine out because I want to convey my emotion and my reaction raw. I don't want to, you know, write anything down. But he should definitely, if you're in this position of power where you're influential over the lives of thousands of people in terms of their perception of reality, and you're over here being sarcastic and standoffish to people that could conceivably become America first. But no, instead you're going to be patronizing and basically wrong about a lot of things and not being self-aware enough to know that you're being an ass right now and wasting people's time. Why? Because you're just rambling. Like, come on, get to the point. It's like, even look at the subtitles. Is probably the greatest example of a phenomenon in history, largely thanks Why? Why say all that? Just say, is this a good example in history? Because I just shaved like 4 or 5 words off of that statement. Why do you have to keep talking, bro? Nobody wants to hear this shit. Oh my God. Okay, so we're going to move on to 6 minutes and 11 seconds, where we're probably going to see another good take, right?
War in Guatemala, which killed 100,000 people, our end. So let me ask you something if you're in the pro-Ukraine camp. Did you care about the civil war in Guatemala, which killed 100,000 people? Or what about the Iran-Iraq war, which killed 1 million people? Certainly the Congo civil war, which has killed 5.5 million people. Or at least the drug wars in Mexico, right, which have killed 375,000 people. All of these conflicts have occurred in the last few decades. They've all objectively been more brutal than what's happening now. So why didn't you care? Like seriously, why not? Why didn't anyone care? And the reason that no one, including yourself, gave a damn is the same reason that everyone, including yourself, gives a damn now. The media. So the only question left for an honest person to ask themselves is, why does the media want me to care about this conflict in particular? Less people are dying. It's less brutal. We have no geopolitical interest in Ukraine, just as we didn't in all these other conflicts. So then why? What's your answer? You don't have one. Because
okay, so this is going to be really cool to talk about, because on a surface level you'd be like, okay, that was really smart for him to point out, but like when you get into a deeper level of understanding of these things, you would eventually figure out that he's probably talking about how, you know, why doesn't the media cover all these deaths in Mexico, which it does, but obviously it happens so often that people don't care anymore. They're desensitized to civil wars in Latin America. But why do they talk about these Europeans fighting each other? Well, isn't that kind of inherent in that Europeans are seen as more important because their politics is of a grander scale than Latin America? And also, doesn't that cover the fact that, you know, if America is so invested into NATO and the EU, and so they want the media to cover Ukraine, do you not think that the American government and the FBI and the CIA are not equally as invested into the cocaine smuggling in Colombia and in Mexico, etc.? If anything, it'd be a bigger American interest. Even a globalist mindset would agree that Mexico is a bigger deal than Ukraine and its relation to Russia. But the media covering Ukraine and Russia is not because of the government wanting to. There's no correlation there at all. So he's reading too much into it, at the same time not even understanding what he's talking about. So that's just a little bit of a mistake on his part. So let's go ahead and move on to minute number 15. Let's see what he says here.
Two things. These really are the two most important things for American patriots to be thinking about above all else. And I think that if we could channel our focus and our energy onto these things instead of the other nonsense that we tend to do that with, we might actually have a shot at turning the ship around. So the first one is very simply, are we an actual country? Is the United States of America an actual country? Is it a unique nation, or is it simply a tool to be used by the rest of the world? Like, oh, you want a military to fight for you? United States. You want a higher material standard of living? United States. Like, the point is that if we think that the purpose of the United States of America is to defend the desired purposes of other countries, and if we think that the purpose of the American people is to perpetually sacrifice for everyone else in the world while getting nothing in return for it, then we've lost the plot and we deserve whatever happens to us. And the second thing to be thinking about is the unavoidable reality that in the same way that a compass, when functioning properly, will always point north, any analysis of the issues facing the American people, when conducted properly, is always going to point back to their government and to their ruling class as the culprit. Like, virtually in every case. I've stayed up, I've done the math. There is virtually no problem facing the American people that cannot be traced back to the dangerous mixture of malevolence, incompetence, and corruption that rules over us, and that has for quite some time.
So right now he's saying, you know, this is a good point on the surface level, like I said before, that a lot of issues, in fact, the vast majority of them are because of the government doing something wrong, insofar as maybe they intervene in the economy, causing a recession down the line, or expanding healthcare in a way that jeopardizes the economy later on as well. You know, things that typically bite the American government in the butt, and historically other governments. But what he's missing entirely from the equation is, well, you're a populist, right? But you also are against democracy, John. So if that's the case, why are you not blaming the people? Okay, so you're pro-government control and you're pro-elite, but you want you to be the elite, right? You want your people to be the elite. So you're going to blame the elite class for screwing over the people, but the people elected the elite, but you're against democracy. So how does that even make sense, right? So you're against democracy, but you blame the elites that were elected by the people that you want to take care of for the problems that you have in the country. Like, he hasn't thought this through. And it's kind of tragic because so many people think this guy is smart, and he is, but you know, he's not on this level, nigga. So like, come on. Guy needs to think more about what he says before he rambles on for minutes at a time and barely getting any points through. Okay? You know, by the time I was a third of the way through the video, when I first was watching it, I thought I'd seen the whole thing, and I was damn right, because at the end I was hearing the same point 3 times over and just him mixing the pot. It was not really a good use of my time, quite frankly. But let's go ahead and keep going to let me see. 1944, a really good year. Obviously, we had the the siege of Leningrad lifted this year. Okay.
Firearm accessory companies. Okay, we're gonna watch the video now.
Что будет от чего зависеть? Будет ли что-то зависеть от хода переговоров? Наши действия будут зависеть не от хода переговоров, а от безусловного обеспечения безопасности России сегодня и неприятно. Ну разве французы взяли Канада и США, и у США? Ну все.
Timeline what he's talking about right now, but at least some of us are surprised, for lack of a better description, at how rational his position is. Like, it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know what you guys think, but he's correct on the history of NATO expansion. He's got the timeline right. He's got the details right. I can't find too much wrong with it. But
okay, so NATO expansion. Now, this is a piece of trivia you need to know. This is something where historically you need to be high in acumen to understand, and that is that the NATO expansion happened over the course of decades. It trickled in. It wasn't something that happened all of a sudden. It was all planned out, at least in terms of schematically. The concepts were there for decades before any particular country joined after 1952. Anyway, the point being that to say that the Russians were caught off guard or anything like that is completely asinine, and I don't think he's saying that. But what he is saying is that the Americans and the Europeans wanted to encroach on the Russian territory, and that's a valid thing to say. You know, of course, they want to bottle up Russia and keep them weak. But isn't that in the interest of everybody involved, right? And in terms of Russia being the victim, it's for the right reason, right? It's not like Russia is like this delicate little flower that didn't do nothing, right? And, you know, if we are ostensibly in America and in the West, we should be defending the West, even if they're in the wrong. I mean, we live here. We have to live with the consequences of what happens to them. So rooting for their failure and supporting Russia, which is a shithole country, is completely retarded. But let's go ahead and keep playing.
It's also important to note that our society especially is susceptible to being misled because of how central technology is to our lives. Like, everybody is constantly plugged in. Everything is always passed through this hyper-consensus filter now. It's basically the greatest system for distributing propaganda that the world has ever seen. And things like literally just get memory hold now. Like, people do not remember things at all anymore. They simply just update themselves to whatever is currently the good thing to support, so as to try to gain status by being the most caring about the current.
Again, on the surface level, this is a very intelligent observation to make. And a lot of 15-year-olds and a lot of impressionable people will fall for this and be like, okay, so it's technology that is streamlining the devastation of intellectual discourse in America. Okay, because technology makes people have lower attention spans, which makes them more impulsive and ruins their dopamine receptors. And, you know, Nathaniel Abbott, you know, he talks about this a lot, but basically the point being that he is kind of right that technology does make it so that only mainstream sources are popularized, and on the first and second pages of the internet, you're typically going to find something that is curated by not the elites, but the algorithm by liberals that run these companies. But what he's missing out on is that sure, technology is making this more of an easy thing to do, but, you know, 50, 70 years ago, what was the phenomena different as, okay? And what I mean by that is, what's the big difference with technology and without having technology? It's not like there was a big diverse set of knowledge that people had. It's not like people watched different things 50 years ago. They all still had the same TV stations, okay? They still all had the same popular books. And if you really were so inclined to read something that is strange, you could have done that 50 years ago, and you could have done that now, actually, because they're still books, okay? And in terms of movies, the movies were all the same in the 50s, right? Hollywood was still making the movies. So to blame American you know, retardation on technology is asinine. So he's missing the woods for the trees, or whatever you want to use the analogy as. Point being that the guy is reading into something and making a good point, and then not looking further and seeing that there's a bigger issue, and he just doesn't see it. It's kind of like an iceberg, and, you know, Ben Shapiro might say, like, the left is cringe, and then John is like, well, no, you're cringe and the left is cringe, and then I'll look and I'll be like, you're both cringe and the third perspective is also stupid. Okay, so we're just getting into multiple, you know, deep layers of the onion. We're going to keep moving on towards 27 minutes in. So let's go ahead. All right, here we go.
If you don't just buy into the propaganda. But anyways, let's wind the clocks back here. You might remember for the longest time, Ukraine was called the Ukraine, right? Now, recently they've dropped that because it alludes to the reality of the situation that they're trying to suppress, which is that Ukraine is basically not a real country. Now, I could explain to you why that is, but I'm not really interested in doing that for three reasons. One, I don't feel like it. Two, it isn't really relevant to the discussion, which we'll explain. And three, nobody who's making an argument for the sovereignty of Ukraine would ever make an argument for the sovereignty of the United States. Ever, never, not ever. So it's not even worth your time. They don't care about sovereignty. They care about virtue signaling. Republicans...
Okay, so then why even bring it up? Oh, so the Ukraine, they changed the naming of it to be more palatable to their worldview. So what? I mean... Okay, so what does Ukraine even mean in Russian or Slavic? It's the border. So what? Does it mean that it's not a real country? Who cares? I mean, the Ukrainian people obviously have their own culture and they have their own dialect. I mean, that much is obvious. And to say that they don't because of them being owned by Russia at certain points doesn't make any sense. It's kind of akin to saying that that under Greater Colombia, Colombia was basically the rightful owner of Venezuela, but in reality, after decades of being apart, both had the same language kind of, but different dialects and different subtleties in the culture. And to say that they don't have a relevant ethnic identity is asinine. And if he were a Ukrainian, he would probably understand that better. But because he doesn't have the empathy to actually feel bad for these people, he's kind of just shoving it under the rug, which again is illogical because it makes him look stupid, because he opens up a lane of attack rhetorically with this by saying, oh, well, who gives a shit about Ukraine? It's like, well, then why even mention it in the first place, right? So again, not very logically consistent from John. We can move on to minute 31. Let's see what goes on. Of course, okay, so he's shilling stuff. Okay, well, guys got to make money. I don't really blame him for having ads, but I'm going to skip.
Notice how they're calling it Kyiv now. It's Kiev. It's always been Kiev. But anyways, in 2014, the Obama administration backed a soft coup in Kiev called the Color Revolution, which toppled a Russia-friendly government in the name of democracy and who we are. And it did this by artificially coordinating mass street demonstrations and chaos through social media. Ring a bell? So Putin responds in 2014.
So he's just going to let this slip through, right? So Obama did a color revolution. It's not called the color revolution. It's just a concept politically. So he's got that wrong. But not to delve into my autism, we're going to be talking about how Obama allegedly somehow fomented through social media. He astroturfed, and his State Department astroturfed riots somehow. Like maybe they funded the riots. Is that what John's saying? And he did this to start a color revolution, and the Republicans didn't point this out in 2016 because they were in on it too. So like this conspiracy that John is saying that Obama was involved in the overthrowing of the Russian supportive leader in Ukraine is asinine. And even beyond that, he's also saying that he fomented the riots to begin with. And it's not because the Ukrainians had some valid reason to protest simping for Russia. No, it's because it's got to be the Americans, right? It has to be the gays that run the country. Like really? Like you don't have to make everything a conspiracy to be right, okay? I'm not a big fan of the American government, to be honest, but I don't have to believe in conspiracies to get to that conclusion. You're just making shit up at this point to confirm your own bias. It's not cool. It's not cool. And again, the only people that really find this palatable are people that are on the far right, and not to be a faggot about it, but like definitely if the people that find Bernie awesome and based are the people that are far left, but nobody in between. That's basically what John Doyle is, insofar he's a paleocon and he's really far right, and that's fine. I'm far right as well, but you know, again, who are you appealing to? Or are you just preaching to the choir? Like I just want to know, dude. Come on. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to I keep saying that, 3442. Yeah, we have Joe Biden. Okay.
Even Biden predicted it back in 1997, which I'll show you right now. But there's no acknowledgement of the coup in 2014, the wars in the ethnically Russian parts of the country, the decades of NATO expansion eastward, despite promising not to, the little geopolitical games and antagonizations, literally laughing at their request to join NATO. But no, it's just a madman who just wants to take over the world. Really?
Okay, so the West promised that Russia would join NATO. At what point exactly? Or the EU? At what point? And the most that people on this side of the argument will bring up is that, well, you know, Clinton or Bush or whatever have you gave a commitment, you know, like they whispered into Putin's ear, or they whispered into like this bureaucrat in Russia's ear that, hey, you're going to join NATO one day. Like, okay, and what kind of naive sense of politics do you have to actually believe that telling somebody something audibly is going to change anything at all in terms of diplomacy, and even more importantly, actual treaties in joining NATO, for example? Okay, the weight of somebody telling somebody something in a confidential sense is literally nothing. Okay, so even if that's true that they promised Russia, it's not like they wrote it down somewhere. So who fucking cares anyway, right? Come on, like that's so naive. What moral naivety do you have to really believe this, dude? Come on.
Even Biden understood this. Take a look.
I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that.
Yeah, literally, if we start admitting Baltic states into NATO, Russia's going to get cheesed. And we do it anyway, and exactly as predicted, we're dealing with this now. And it's not because Putin is crazy.
Okay, so when Joe Biden agrees with you 25 years ago, he's based, but in reality, it could just be that both things are wrong. Just because something antagonizes Russia doesn't mean that they're going to do anything necessarily, right? So, of course, if you know, the Baltic states joined NATO, I believe, in 2004, around that time. So it's been about 18 years. So since about the time I was born. And Putin only invaded just now Ukraine. Okay, so much for aggravating Putin, and oh my God, you know, just wait guys, okay? You piss him off, he's gonna do a war, and then you wait 15, 16, 17, 18 years, and then he finally fucking does it. Oh my god, I was right. No, you weren't, dude. Okay, Joe Biden was not right. The Baltic states joining NATO was a really good idea, and it actually moved NATO to the border of Russia, and Russia didn't do jack shit about it. Okay, and the Ukraine is a completely separate issue from NATO expanding into the Baltic area. It has nothing to do with that insofar as the pretext is for the war. So again, you're completely missing the point, John. So come on, this is so
crazy and
silly.
insane and a bad guy, just like in the movies. And it's not even because he's paranoid or even like driven by this desire to restore the glory of the USSR or whatever. It's because of the last few decades, and in particular the last 10 years of Western efforts to accelerate their aggression towards Russia through Ukraine. Of course, timed opportunistically to coincide with the domestic instability of the United States and the ascension of allied countries like China, which is a whole other thing. Now, Putin is very open about this. He's explained this over and over again for years, and we're like shocked to see that he's actually doing what he said he would do. And since it would seem to me that he more or less has an actual case and is relatively justified in his actions, we can't argue with him. So instead, we rely on appeals to emotion through propaganda. That's why if you turn on the news, you don't see anything even approximating an intelligence arguments, a historical analysis. No, it's all footage designed to make you feel sad. And because we don't have a case, we have to do that. Our leadership is...
Again, he makes another good point, but he's missing the greater reason. Okay, so the media doesn't talk with great detail or argumentative prowess with siding with Ukraine over the Russians. Now, is that because they don't have an argument, or is it because people don't really care? And if they already believe that Ukraine is in the victim stance, then why is it that they would even bother doing these collegiate debates that John so heavily denies having any validity because they don't have any credibility as the media, right? So the point being that he is wrong about the media motivation. What I believe is that the media is probably just trying to pander for views, and they know that doing these sort of like Destiny, Vouch, kind of like hyper intellectual, you know, talking in all these like circles about, you know, little data points and the Budapest Memorandum and all that other garbage is going to get them anywhere. But no, CNN does not make views off of these arguments, so they're going to go ahead and do this victim narrative, which is somewhat true, but at the same time, it's for views, okay? And if anything, that kind of proves John right about how the media is benefiting off of the war, okay? But again, he's still wrong. He's still fucking wrong. It's kind of crazy. It's crazy how he can be so right and so wrong at the same time. It's very cool. Anyways, we're going to keep moving on to the timestamp that I have next up for my clip, and it's going to be the 37th minute right here.
And find their names on a plaque because they were in the original founding convoy in 1701 alongside Cadillac. And now in a city that's older than the country in which it resides and that was built by my ancestors, I'm seeing all these Ukrainian immigrants mass protesting about how we need to get America involved in a war to settle their ethnic grudges. Right. Everybody's an American until the ethnic grudges come to a head. And then we see where the allegiance truly lies, right? They're an American when they want to ditch their country to come participate in our decadent society, but then they maneuver to try to drag us into foreign wars, which will take lives and money away from American families. So with no disrespect intended, go do it yourself. You want to start World War III? All right, let's reinstitute the draft, but only for those whose families got here after World War II. And then we'll see how American everybody really is.
What is your point there? Okay, so also this is such a leftist point of view and like a softy kind of liberal sort of bitchy, condescending. Well, you fight in the war. Oh, you support the war? Go fight in it. No, fuck you. I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I could be for a war and not want to be in it. What's wrong with that, right? Come on. Like if I say I want to expand manufacturing in the Midwest, oh, so why don't you build robots in Michigan? Why don't you put together cars? Nah, nigga, I don't want to. Other people can, and that's perfectly excellent for them to do that. Okay, but I'm not, because I have other interests and I have other talents. Why would I waste it in the war? Okay, and to be quite frank, we have plenty of people in America that are physically fit, that are 18 years old, but are high school dropouts or are basically people that are not going to college, people that are not going to amount to shit otherwise, people that are C students, people that are not that intelligent. And those would fit perfectly for the military, not even necessarily in war, but just generally in terms of working with your hands and doing things that are not very cerebral, okay? But he's not even taking that into account in terms of his logic, okay? So I believe that John is wrong here because... Also, I just want to talk about this real quick. We'll do a poll of families after 1945 who wants to fight for Ukraine. Let's see how patriotic you are now. What is that point? Is that like a dog whistle? Like, I don't get it. And again, I'm not a leftist. I don't really care if he's racist. There's a lot of validity to what he says about, immigration and all that. But, for him to go ahead and be like, oh, you people that came after 1945, unlike my family that got here a couple hundred years ago, you guys, I want to see you guys fight for my country. It's like, nigga, we're all a part of the same country now, okay? Let go, all right? Now, I understand, giving citizenship to, like, Indians that got here 2 years ago is stupid, and I agree, but for, families that got here 50 years ago, like, what do you want us to do, right? right? My family got here like 50 years ago as well. I'm an American, right? And my stance on the war has literally nothing to do with my immigration status, not even a little bit, okay? As somebody who was born close to where John was in Michigan, I personally care about the Ukraine insofar as I think that they're the victim. But I also don't think that it has anything to do with whether or not my family was on the Mayflower or whether or not John's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather moved to Detroit 300 years ago, okay? Frankly, I don't really care whether or not that happened. That doesn't really change anything. So, this sort of like reach of, it's these new immigrants that want us to fight for Ukraine. Really? Really, dude? I don't think so.
Deep roots in this country. And if me wanting to put my country first is offensive to you, we've learned a lot about where your allegiance is actually pledged, haven't we? You should be kissing the soil that this country is built upon, not demanding its people leave and go die on your soil when they have no reason to. But I guess it's not entirely their fault. How are they supposed to believe in America when we don't even believe in America anymore? And again, the needle points back to our leadership, right? These people have destroyed everything that the American flag was supposed to represent. Everyone always makes fun of the right, and me especially, for holding the 1950s in such high esteem. And it's like, yeah, if you showed someone from the 1950s what the 2020s are like, they would be absolutely terrified. It would be a dystopian hell to them. The people are fat, they're strung out on drugs, everybody's eating highly processed.
See, this is something that annoys me, right? So he brings up another valid point. Okay, obesity is high, relatively speaking. But how is that an incrimination of the society in a way that you're positing it to be? The guy is acting like the world is ending. Oh, people are going to die, Nick. People are getting fat. Okay, so, like, why are you so emotionally attached to it? It's kind of alarming how like, uncool he's being about it. It's kind of concerning, and again, people are on prescription drugs. Okay, but what's inherently wrong about that exactly? You're not articulating it. You're just throwing it in the wind like, oh, people are getting fat. Oh, they're taking pills. Oh, girls are dating black guys. Well, can you please explain how that's bad? And you know what? It is probably bad. In most cases, you probably shouldn't get fat. You probably shouldn't do prescription drugs. And you should watch who you date and see if you fit in. But you shouldn't probably just throw those things out and just see, like, if the other people eat the shit up and be like, okay, well, I can read into why that's bad. Just explain it, dude. And also, why are you so vindictive about it, too? Oh, these people are fat. They're fucking pigs. Like, nigga, like, calm down. You're not getting paid to be angry, okay? Jeez. What the fuck?
Foods. All of a sudden, there's a market for selling digestive drugs and erectile dysfunction drugs to young people because their bodies aren't responding well to the literal poison that they're eating every day. Everywhere you go, everything you do, tracked.
Is that really true, though? And I have noticed that, guys that are like 20 years old are taking the gas station pills. And is that necessarily because of the poison that we're eating? Okay. Are these pills being consumed a lot in Europe? I don't think so. Are these pills being consumed consumed a lot in Australia? I don't think so. I haven't heard of that before. And they eat all the microplastics we eat. They eat all the GMO stuff as well. So how true is that, John, anyway? And in terms of this, I mean, there's more of a nuanced black pill point of view on the whole dick pill thing. I don't want to talk about that. It's kind of gross. About how, women's expectations go up, so they want you to last like 20 minutes. And obviously, most guys can't do that. Not because of McDonald's and not because of drinking out of a plastic bottle. It's probably because of more porn, but not even that, but necessarily just physical limitations that most people cannot keep it up for 20 minutes. But I don't want to get into depth about it. Point being is that the guy is just throwing shit into the wind, okay? It's pretty annoying.
Recorded, it's in a database somewhere. I saw someone say this recently. Imagine what would happen if you got into a bar fight in another state as recently as 1980 and you didn't have your driver's license. You could simply refuse to identify yourself and they'd be like, well, you have no concept of what it means to be truly off the grid. You have no concept of what that kind of freedom tastes like. I bet it tastes better than smartphones. I bet it tastes better than paying 25% markup for drive-through food so you can sit on your ass and wait for it to be delivered. Never underestimate the human willingness to sacrifice objective well-being at the altar of convenience. Blockbuster, a great example of this. It is time for the introduction to Blockbuster Protectionism video. The nostalgia for the 1950s is more or less rooted in like what a fundamentally good society looks like when it's blessed with prosperity, but with ill-managed prosperity comes decadence. Same thing with the 1990s. That nostalgia is more or less rooted in what a country looks like when technology begins its integration into the mainstream. Like, oh, it's fun. Look at this. Wow. I'm choosing to play Kid Pix. I'm choosing to play N64. I'm choosing to do whatever. Now it's like we are literal slaves to technology, literal slaves. And there's no practical answer to this problem because, again, we can never underestimate the human willingness to sacrifice objective well-being at the altar of convenience.
Again, people in the populist right tend to mention this a lot, and they have sort of a point. Is technology getting out of hand? Yeah, sort of. But that's not the technology's fault. It is the fault of the people that are giving into their desire, and he's not really talking about that in depth. Instead, he's going to castigate the technology and kind of blaming that as if the inanimate iPhone has any problem at all with his existence, like just sitting there. It is, in fact, people being addicted to their phone. And again, John, the very simple question would be, nigga, what do you do with your time? What, do you like read books in silence without screens? I like probably a little bit, but not too much, right? You can't do that. I mean, that's boring. Okay. And in terms of how much he uploads on Instagram, and definitely not YouTube, he takes forever to upload there, but on other websites, like, you upload frequently, okay? So it's clear that you use screens several hours a day. So for you to be criticizing other people to be addicted because they're addicted to their cell phones and their computers, like, you are one of these people. You're just kind of more self-aware about it because you're a smart guy. But that's about where it ends, okay? And to also prescribe only negativity to technology is undercutting the facilitation of many good things, commerce, communication, etc. So to just hate on the technology on its own is going to alienate a lot of people because you're not giving them a valid reason to hate it. And even so, for example, the Amish, at least the Amish live without screens, and they hate the screens, and they hate technology. Nigga, you live with the technology, and you use the technology, and you talk shit about the technology. Like, pick a lane, bro. Come on. God, this is so annoying. Anyway, let's keep moving on towards, minute 43.
And our destiny will once again be our own. And your destiny will be facing justice for what you've done to the world. But these people are so narcissistic and so possessed by hubris that they would rather blow up the world before they die. So that, right? We're on our decline. Hey, don't beat yourself up about it, big guy. It's perfectly natural. It happens to all of us, But maybe there's some poetic justice to be found in that our decline is somewhat similar to what destroyed the British Empire, which of course we declared independence from about 250 years ago. Because if you look at what basically destroyed the British Empire, it could be reduced essentially to two things: free trade and interventionism. And there was a celebrated British historian by the name of A.G.P. Taylor, and he once said something to the effect of, though the object of being a great power is to fight a great war, the only way to remain a great power is to avoid one. World War II inarguably destroyed the British Empire. Like, that was the final nail in the coffin. And if you look at what made America great, ignoring the fact that we were able to be the back-to-back World War champs because we avoided getting involved for longer than any other developed country, which is how we were able to walk away more or less unscathed, we were built and made strong by protectionism and non-interventionism. Globalization killed the British Empire, and it's killing America now. Like, there's this myth.
So foreign trade and intervention is killing America. Really, nigga? Really? Is that it? No, so that's what's killing America. It isn't that we have this debt problem, that we overspend, that we have all these entitlements, that we have these, gays running the government, that we have these incompetent, demented people that run the government. Is that it? Or is it because we spend a small fraction of our economy a year on Iraq or Afghanistan? Well, dude, we spent like $2 trillion on Afghanistan over 20 years. Oh, okay, so we spent a tenth of what we make in a year on that. That is basically like if you made $100,000 a year and you're complaining that over the last 20 years you spent $10,000 on a car. That's nothing in the grand scheme of things. So for him to point this out as if it's killing America, no, it isn't. Now, again, if we were bogged down in like 10 different wars, and sure, like if we were deployed in Somalia, if we were in an active, like coup in Venezuela, if we had a guerrilla war that we were fighting down in Brazil and all that, yeah, probably at that point it'd get too expensive. But to say that what the military is doing now is killing America is definitely not true. And at worst, it's like slowly hurting it. But it's definitely not the reason why it's dying at all, okay? I mean, it's kind of like going to somebody who's like 450 pounds and 80 years old and saying, well, you have COVID, nigga, you're gonna die. It's like, well, that's not even like the 20th biggest issue with the country as it is, okay? So come on.
Of America being built by like total free trade because international finance and capital literally lobbied to put that into your mind. But if you look at like Mount Rushmore, for example, every man on that mountain was a protectionist. And I don't need to read a bunch of like economic theory to know that in brass text, production equals prosperity. We're like scratching our heads that we've got
production equals prosperity. That is true. But that's basically what every socialist thinks too, right? That's what every guy like Infrared on Haas from Infrared, that streamer, that communist. We need better industry to save inflation, to save the economy. We need more manufacturing. Is that really the way to fix America? No, it isn't. And frankly, there is a value in things that are intangible, right? IP, patents, technology that has not been invented yet. Things like this, stories, movies, etc. These things have value. And so for him to just throw those away and be like, okay, well, no, we have to build stuff with metal. Is that really the end-all be-all? What country produces the most? China, probably? Okay, sure. Is China rich? No. It's poor as hell. Look at the cities. They're all shitholes. And the ones that are nice are basically far and few between. And even half of those are ghost towns where nobody lives because communism doesn't even work. And I know that he agrees with me on that basis, that communism is bad. But you're using their arguments for me. You're basically saying production is money. Not really. That's not real life. That's not real life. Not anymore. So also, okay, all these great presidents were protectionist. So, I mean, They could be good presidents despite the protectionism being a bad thing. And even if protectionism was good 180 years ago, with the economy being completely different and trade being completely different, that does not mean it's appropriate for now. Okay, so again, there's no correlation between those 4 presidents on Mount Rushmore being any more competent than the other 40 or whatever have you presidents, because of the fact that the other ones weren't as protectionist as the 4 on the mountain. Okay, so his logic is completely skewed, and he's, again, half-truths, and no, okay, sorry, he's being completely honest. He's just wrong, okay? So he's half right. It's not a half-truth, he's just half right.
Got this multi-trillion-dollar nanny state and welfare system. We're like 25 trillion in debt. We base our whole economy on debt, usury, fractional reserve banking, middle management, the laptop class, and service, and like gigs. And we're like, wait a minute, why is China winning? Their economy is based on advanced manufacturing, production, market economies. Now hold on a second. The State Department told me they're communists. The point being that China's winning because their economy is built to function as an economy and not like as this debt trap to benefit the ruling class at the expense of the American people. Well, John, you sound like a leftist. No, you misunderstand. I don't want to take money away from business owners. That's fake and gay. And even worse, it's un-American. But a serious country whose ruling class were exploiting its people like this would maybe, I don't know, seize some assets from some people who got their wealth by destroying our country. And I don't know, maybe use them to subsidize the mass deportations of illegal aliens. I don't know. Hey, I'm just throwing out ideas. I like ideas. I'm a real ideas guy. I'm Dave.
Okay, hold on, pause. Okay, so he's over here talking about, wow. Anyway, so he's talking about how he sounded like a leftist, so he's self-aware about that at least. I'll give him that. But he's saying that that we need to lock these people up that are manipulating money. And first of all, that isn't practical at all, and what they're doing isn't really illegal to begin with. But let's say hypothetically it were, and you want to seize their property and all that. It's not how the economy works, okay? You know, money bags over here isn't going to have $200 billion in net worth, and you just take it and then just put the money into the economy. It doesn't work that way. Oftentimes the people that are really rich, that are, you know, scummy, are going to have their money all over in different countries. And not only that, but they're also going to have their businesses divested, so that you would have to take over the businesses and then liquidate them or give them to other people. And like, it's a complete mess. And that's why the government hasn't really done that in the past, despite having a public mandate to do it, is because of corruption in part, but also because it's completely impractical and a naive wet dream of something that a 12-year-old socialist would believe in as well. So you're completely wrong on that. And furthermore, he's over here talking about things like, oh, China is prospering whereas America is faltering. And he says that that's due to the manufacturing prowess of China. And that's completely missing the point. Okay, so he's seeing a pattern of America going down, and we're using, crony capitalism, and we're doing, usurious interest, and we're having a Federal Reserve with monetary easing and all these other things that could be seen as immoral if you're very religious, etc. And he's seeing these things. He's also correlating with China doing well, and China producing things with their people's small hands, and saying that China is prospering and America's going down, and that's because of the way their economies are set up. But in reality, that is kind of not true, and there's more things to take into account that are part of the nuance bill, and that is that China is on the ascent because they started from nowhere. So America, if it had the GDP of China 2 years ago, would still be on the up curve compared to China. That's because China is so bad, it is so poor, that it going up at all would be a big deal. Okay, so it's kind of like saying, oh, well, the Congo went up in GDP 15% last year. Oh, really? How much money is that? Oh, well, it went from 20 million to 24 million. Whoop-de-fucking-do, okay? So China is doing better than America, but the proportions of what we're talking about are substantially smaller. But not only that, but again, we're talking about over 1 billion Chinese, so they have unlimited labor. And not only that, but their birth rate is even worse than America right now, I believe. So even if they're prospering now, it's not going to last. And, as shitty as America is now, we are starting off at a way better point economically than they are. Okay, when you look at the GDP per capita of China, Chinese people on average have like $5,000. They make $5,000 a year, tops. Probably more like 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000. Okay, the average Mexican, and you know how poor Mexicans are like twice or 3 times as rich on a yearly basis than the average Chinaman. Okay, and Americans, for example, have a median income of like 60 grand, or on the low estimate like 45,000. So we're leagues and bounds richer than the Chinese. Okay, and so even if their economy is bigger than ours, it would have to become like $100 trillion economy for it to even match the standard of living of Americans. Okay, so this whole production nonsense is not even a valid argument. And also keep in mind, how much do we pay Americans to work in manufacturing? More than minimum wage, of course. So probably something like $25 an hour, maybe 30. Okay. Now, what about Chinese people? How much do Americans pay Chinamen to build their plastic shit and their iPhones? Probably like $1 an hour, if I'm being generous to the Chinese. Okay. So basically, you're going from paying somebody $200 a day in America, $30 for 8 hours of work. You're paying over $200 in labor, or you're going to pay a Chinaman maybe $15 in labor a day. So again, that's the reason why China is succeeding over America, if anything, is that they have very cheap labor. Why is that? Well, the standard of living is low, and so they have low wage expectations, and things are cheaper there. Why? Because it's a shithole, and it's not going to be. And if it succeeds and it catches up to America, then the price to have workers build your stuff in China will be the same as America. So even if it succeeds in what it wants, which is having a manufacturing prowess over America, it would blow up in their butt, because basically they would price themselves out of cheap labor, and it would all just flood into Sri Lanka and India, which is sort of happening in real life anyway. So anyway, with that huge diatribe out of the way, the point is that John is completely wrong, whether it be economics or on rhetoric, he's just way off.
Ruben. That's why these companies, they're siding with China. People like to say, well, companies are being infiltrated by the Chinese. China's the enemy. In actuality, it's the companies choosing to side with China because China's a serious country, which has made clear that in the event that they unequivocally become the dominant global economy, there will be punishments for companies that did not side with them. So if you're a company looking to survive, are you going to side with a country that can't even quite figure out what bathroom it's supposed to be using, or a country that disappeared Jack Ma? There's always going to be an apex of power. And some countries know who's in charge, and they have a right to exist, which isn't even true, since, as we've covered, their government is completely forced to Ukraine, since that has no bearing on our values, because who, like the caricature that I've constructed in my head of them, I'm sure you've seen it already. This is how the Vice President of the United States describes the moral conflict of the Ukraine-Russia situation. This is the level of sophistication that one of the most powerful people in the country is capable of. And please, compare this to the one demonstrated by the crazy, insane bad guy Putin as you watch.
If you're watching any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically that's wrong.
Russia is a big country and Ukraine is a small country, and Russia invaded them, and basically that's not okay. Points for brevity, but you got one part of that wrong, Madam Vice President, which is the part where you said that Ukraine's an actual country. That's a joke because, of course, we're joking because you actually got that wrong because you are incapable of transcending the Saturday morning cartoon. And you really just have to understand this.
Okay, so here's another clip, and look, I'm not going to be completely negative towards John. I think he's on the money here that, Kamala is a retard, and the way she talks to, like, the urban hip-hop stations is kind of funny, because obviously she knows a lot more than she's letting on, but she was specifically asked to dumb it down to people, and that's how, like, she's basically, like, bird feeding these like, urban, black people on politics. Like, they don't even know what Ukraine is, and most people don't know, and that's fine, but that's funny. So I agree with John on here, actually, believe it or not. Anyway, let's go to clip. Let me see here. Okay, let's go to 104 actually. So we're actually making some progress here. We're over halfway done with the video. Okay, so got you right there.
Etc. If we are to be dragged into that, then they have to make an argument for that. We don't have to make an argument against getting involved in that. That should be the default, right? So if you're going to take money and lives away from American households, then it is your responsibility to highlight what interest we have in that conflict. That's what a rational government would do. But we don't, of course, have a rational government. Moreover, we don't have a rational people, and so they don't even have to do that because they can just run the emotional propaganda campaigns and achieve the same effect, like we've been saying. But the bottom line is this. If we believe what they've been telling us for decades, that our purpose is to serve the world, that we are not unique and good and exceptional in our own right, that it's only that we allow the world to come here, that's what makes us good. It's only that we act as charity and the sort of like mercenary apparatus for the rest of the world, that's what makes us good. Then maybe we deserve what we get. But that's not true. And if you actually believe that America's purpose is to serve the purposes of other countries, then you've lost the plot. And you're a globalist, and I don't care for you. So even though America is a clearly defined nation with a clear history and border and culture, and most importantly, the ability to defend all of that, even if it suicidally doesn't choose to, we don't get to be a real country. We're just an idea. We're an experiment.
See,
but
so
Ukraine, which literally, as we just covered, only exists because it's profit.
Repeating the same thing over again, and it's kind of annoying because, like, I don't want to hear the same thing over again. That's kind of like a waste of my time. So let's go ahead and move on. So let's go to 125, and we're gonna get some more controversial takes, which, at least he has the balls to say a lot of these things. Okay, so let's go ahead and go. All right. Everybody
that's advocating for this should be shipping over to Ukraine right now. Put your own life on the line or shut up about what should be done with ours, But they won't do that because remember, it's about the interests of the ruling class, of the global
How does that make any sense? You have to ship your own body to go fight in Ukraine if you believe that people should fight in Ukraine? Why? Extend that logic with any war that you don't want to be a part of, John. Really? Like as if you're gonna go and fight, if for whatever reason the Canadians invade, you're gonna be on the front lines. I doubt it. And even if you were on the front lines, that'd be a waste of talent. Because you clearly aren't like a physical specimen. Like, you should probably be behind a computer making content, right? And, that's not a slight against you. That's just the way it is. And to be against people that don't want to fight in a war and support it is asinine, okay? It is just naive, okay? It's something that a 14-year-old girl would say as rhetoric against the Iraq war, circa 2005, quite frankly. And again, with the whole talking about, oh, you're doing the interest of the global elites. why even frame it that way? Just respect people's opinion, right? Insofar as, can somebody come into their own conclusion without conscientiously kissing the ass of the elites, right? Most people that believe what the elites say do not kiss the ass of the elites on purpose. They just fall into the trap. So for you to be like, oh, go ahead and kiss their ass, nigga, they're not even doing that on purpose. So stop doing that. That's condescending.
Libtard medicine of the globalist American empire. It's not about you. Oh, you can't buy eggs and you're not making enough money for it to be worth it for you to drive to work? Inflation is the price we have to pay to battle Putin. Who's we? Who is we? Why don't you do it? Or rather, like, why don't you do it? Like, just stop. They're literally going to collapse the empire because they think Putin is mean. The history books will literally write.
Nobody thinks that they're collapsing the empire due to fighting the Ukraine. And nobody on the right wing that is blaming the involvement in Ukraine on America is also thinking that the empire will collapse because of the Ukraine. It's not even a big issue either way. So the way he's framing it is dishonest, honestly. And also, oh yeah, so the gas is getting expensive. Yes, so what? If we're looking at the gas prices, you know, the conflict in Russia maybe raised the price 20 cents or something. Okay, it's not a big deal. All right. The major gas difference was in the first year of Joe Biden, where the price went from like, you know, from like 2 something to 450. Not that it went from like 430 to 460. That's not the big difference. It's the first thing. So again, you're missing the point here. And if theoretically we were in a righteous war, sacrificing that 10% differential in gas is definitely worth it. And anybody who is making the decision to quit working over the gas price is clearly not working a job that makes more than $5 an hour, because it just simply does not make sense at that point. So these hypotheticals aren't even mathematically correct. And I'm only pointing this out because he's making an ass out of himself. If he was saying that something that I agree with, I wouldn't be nitpicking it all the time. I'll be honest about that. Okay, let's go to 1 hour and 29 minutes in. And we're going to see another good point. Maybe. Oh, let's go and move back a little bit, actually. All right.
Garner support for war against Putin because he's mean. And of course, this could all literally be avoided if they just said that Ukraine was never going to be in NATO, went back to neutrality. But these people want blood more than anything. So that's not what's being discussed. Like,
so John thinks that if NATO didn't expand and if we weren't in Ukraine, that the Russians wouldn't have invaded it, which might be true. But it's like, number one, we weren't even in Ukraine to begin with. What NATO forces are in Ukraine? I can't think of any right now. So that's bullshit on your part, John. And frankly, like, what makes you think that Putin's being honest? Like, does he have to be honest? It's clear that he implied that he was going to invade sooner than he did. He was dishonest about that. And, you know, any politician is going to lie at various points, including Donald Trump, to be honest. So, you know, to say that Putin's more honest than the liberals is kind of true. But again, like, how is he not lying about saying that he won't invade Ukraine? If anything, the reason why he didn't invade Ukraine in the first place is because NATO was expanding, because he was scared, because he knew that Trump would have fought him back, or that he would have done something to spite him or something like that. So he saw a moment of weakness with Joe Biden as president, as the head of NATO de facto, and took advantage and invaded Ukraine. So even if America backed off and didn't support Ukraine at all starting a couple of years ago, if Joe Biden were still president and I were Vladimir Putin, frankly, I would invade Ukraine and exploit its resources and take its people. Why not? So again, what logic are you following, John? Is it that, you know, Putin's the saint, or that Putin is right about this and that he would never lie and that he's being completely honest and that NATO is a complete, you know, sack of reprehensible nutbags? Or is it somewhere in the middle where, you know, Putin has some, you know, relevant reasons to invade Ukraine, but it's probably something where he waited until we were relatively weak to invade, and not because he was principally against it in the first place, right? Also, if you're talking about America not supporting Ukraine, as far as I know, Putin could have invaded Ukraine several years ago, even up to like 20 years ago if he wanted to. But he didn't think the political situation was appropriate. So maybe it has to do more with that than him principally being against killing people, because he clearly is fine with killing people in wars with South Ossetia, Chechnya, etc. So come on.
We send missiles to his border. He tells us exactly what his problems are. We completely ignore his security interests. We refuse to engage in diplomacy. Why did he do this? What does he want? Men are so confusing. Fact, blue checks literally cannot get it. They are not serious people. Fact, Ukraine's government was overthrown by the global libtard menace for a pro-Western puppet government, and Russia will annex the areas with Russian-speaking populations who want to be a part of Russia, especially because the fake government in Ukraine uses militias to terrorize them, and they have been for almost a decade.
Okay, so let's think this through, okay? So John talks really fast, so maybe he's expecting people to not look into what he's saying and just think like, oh, this feels good, oh, this is base, bro. So let's cut it in. Let's cut into it. So he's, first of all, having this conspiracy that Obama personally and that his politicians, the State Department, etc., personally went in there to incite riots and funded these groups or something, and fomented a coup, you know, handpicked a person to take control of Ukraine, and then that the Ukrainians through popular vote, through electoral victory, handed the presidency or the prime ministership to Vladimir Zelensky, who's a NATO shill. And so there's two ways that John could see this. So either there's this big conspiracy by the liberals to replace the Russian puppet in 2014 with a liberal, and that then the liberals also on top of that rigged the election for Vladimir Zelensky with no proof, by the way, by John or anybody that I know of personally, and installed another liberal guy. And then when Russia invaded Ukraine, just didn't back it up because they're pussies. Or could it be that they didn't actually overthrow the government of Ukraine, and even if they did, they didn't do this mass conspiracy of funding these separatist groups, or in particular funding riots in some intangible way, and probably even after they replaced that liberal stooge, that Russian stooge with the liberal one, that Vladimir Zelensky probably did have the genuine support of the majority of the Ukrainian people, as you can see in the electoral maps, and was able to win them over. Right. So even if there was a coup in 2014, the Ukrainian people in 2019, I believe, obviously did fairly elect Vladimir Zelensky. So most of them are pro-Ukraine and inherently pro-NATO because of that. So either way you slice it, he's wrong in one degree or another. So again, terrible take.
Decade. Fact, NATO sending missiles is not self-determination. If you believe this, you should be institutionalized. And that's how you know it's all based on incompetent, feminine, prideful impulse. Their biggest asset in this whole thing was their propaganda companies, which they've used for soft coups before, like in 2014 in Ukraine. But they all pulled out of Russia. Netflix, Disney, Pornhub, all these companies are leaving Russia, which is crippling the biggest weapon that the U.S. had in Russia long term. And this is supposed to be an own. They're cutting off Russia from Marvel movies, porn, sugar water, social media. This is supposed to hurt them. They're going to be Wakanda by next Christmas. It's like when you criticize women and they're like, good luck getting laid, which sort of implies that their only agency is their sexuality and that they're like highly subject to emotionally governed groupthink. Like, sweetheart, surely you're not suggesting that women have nothing else to offer, right? So maybe it says something when the West gets mad at another country and they tell them, well, we're not going to give you incessantly repetitive children's movies, pornography, poison food, and degenerate media. Like, if that's all we can export to the rest of the world anymore.
Okay, so he does have a valid point that, Disney pulling out and all that doesn't really do anything either way. But then he's also being a dummy, and he's also positing that that these things were destroying Russia, which is sort of true. But then he's also, on top of that, trying to assert that without pornography or the specific main website of that, and Marvel movies and Disney movies, that's gonna magically make he literally said a Wakanda. Now again, he's probably using hyperbole, right? But he is being honest in that he believes that Russia's gonna get a lot better all of a sudden culturally because of Disney and all these things moving away. So we'll see. Obviously we can't tell, but in 5 to 10 years we'll see, is Russia still gonna be an aging backwater European rump state, or is it going to be a country that is flourishing magically? The fertility rate doubles to a normal rate, and all of a sudden there's no more coomerism, they're not all addicted to vodka, and they're all not living in little Soviet apartments, right? No, he's clearly wrong. And of course these liberal institutions that he's talking about, the fast food and all that, are not good for the Russian people, but to say that it's a main contributor to their collapse is not even close to true or exact. And to say that them moving out of the country is going to make a big deal either way is also asinine. Hence why Putin, who was a very popular leader before the invasion of Ukraine and after, with an approval rating of about 70%, if he were so powerful, if he's not controlled by the liberals and the oligarchs, and he's so popular, then why isn't that Putin banned these fast food restaurants? If he cared so much about the Russian people, why didn't he ban pornography? If he's so popular, John. So again, if you think things through the logical conclusion, John, your shit doesn't even make sense.
Maybe we aren't the good guys. Does anyone really believe that we're the good guys? I mean, we're the good guys, right? But these guys, these libtards, they really are a menace, aren't they? And they're global, which makes things pretty tricky, especially because they're a death cult. Are they not? These disgusting, scorned, hateful people, they project this hatred onto us at any given opportunity. You're so hateful. You hate me because I'm full of love. I'm so loving and you're just hateful and mean. Which is ideologically fluent, since leftism, of course, is a rejection of nature, and nature is life. So yeah, they're a death cult. And if you've been paying attention for the last 2 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These people want blood. It's people who aren't vaccinated. It's truck drivers. It's now Russians. Before then, it was people in MAGA hats. But these people are thirsty for blood. They are miserable people with nothing to lose because their lives are miserable, and they've been conditioned to think that it's because of you. That is dangerous. And you see this now with Russian businesses being vandalized, Russians being refused service, people aren't selling Russian vodka, which of course is all just politically correct.
Okay, again, so this is just an extension of how the liberals, sanctioning Russia, morally speaking, is kind of dubious. Yeah, I agree, honestly. So, throwing away Russian products, that's stupid. Hating Russian people, too, is stupid as well. A lot of them don't know what they're getting into. It's kind of like hating Wehrmacht soldiers for being drafted into the Nazi army. That's not really their fault. So again, like what's
Brazil.
wrong?
Like the only thing preventing us from becoming a third world country is the perceived strength of the US dollar. And now the things that would need to happen in order for that to go away are beginning to happen. And after that, the collapse of the material standard of living, the only thing that we're gonna have left is people. We're gonna have our friends, we're gonna
That's kind of silly, okay? So John believes in the Constitution insofar as it has a lot of good things in it. He believes in the right to bear arms. He believes in the English language. He believes in all these cultural institutions that are decaying, sure, but obviously are still there and make America great and made America great a long time ago. And he's saying that the money is the only thing that's keeping us from being Brazil. How does that even make sense? Brazil obviously does not have a good enough culture to sustain itself going forward, and they had the shitty economy to begin with, and so obviously it's going to be run down. But to say that the monetary thriving of America is what's keeping us from becoming Brazil is also stupid, because if America's culture is so cool and it's so righteous, and you goddamn immigrants that came after 1945, y'all better kiss my fucking shoes, and y'all gotta kiss the fucking soil, and you gotta raise the flag, like he said earlier, pretty much. So kiss the land, and have reverence for the institutions, but currency is basically what's keeping us from being Brazil. Like that's not even congruent with what he said an hour ago in the video. So again, just an oversight by John. This doesn't even make sense.
We're gonna have our family, those that we care about, and it's that network that's gonna get us through that if we are to get through that. So there's one more clip I want to play for you, which is a good ending summary, but also discusses the one thing that we would have to hold us together, which is our families, our heritage. Even that is being destroyed. Take a look. So say what you will about Vladimir Putin. Oh, he's a dictator. You don't live under a dictatorship. You don't live under tyranny. Oh, he kills journalists. That doesn't happen here. I mean, literally any criticism that you could have of Putin in Russia exists here in greater magnitude, except that they're materially less well off than we are. But even that, I mean, you look at the gas prices and everything. If gas goes up, everything goes up.
It's $1.80 US right now.
Okay, you heard what he just said, right? Oh, so again, so a lot of valid points in the beginning, and then he just like goes off the deep end at the end of the statement, and he's like, oh, well, they're materially less well off than we are, but look at the gas prices. Dude, really? First of all, Russia is worse off economically, and they've always had a ton of gas, meaning that their gas has always been cheap relative to the rest of the world, including America and Europe. So for decades, their gas has been dirt cheap relative to us, and yet they've still been poor. So even if you look at 2008 during the recession, when the Russians were doing relatively well with the cheap gas, they were still a lot poorer than we are per capita, despite having all that oil. So he's wrong on that count. And then number two, he's saying, oh, well, the gas prices are going up, and if gas goes up, everything goes up, which is true. But again, the gas went up by like maybe 250%, and how much is gas factoring into the economy? Less than 20%. So when you're talking about interval change of maybe less than 30% of the economy, you would literally have to have gas be like $20 a gallon to even approximate being as poor as a fucking Russian. In fact, the average American would probably have to spend $3,000 or maybe like $2,500 on gas every month to be as broke as the average Russian. That is that big of a difference, okay? You're talking about Russia as an economically less well off? Of course it is. Why? Well, look at it. You have a country that is triple the population of Italy, or maybe quadruple, a lot bigger, with a lot more natural resources than Italy, yet has the same GDP or even smaller GDP than Italy. Its GDP is less than $2 trillion, okay? And that's with all those resources. So imagine how small the actual productive sector is minus the oil and the timber and the minerals. So get real, John. And then in terms of, production equals growth, is that, okay, so then where's Russia at exactly? Not doing so hot in the grand scheme of things. And so I don't think John knows this, but the average GDP per capita, as in the amount of money that a average Russian makes a year, is less than $10,000, which is about equivalent to a Mexican. So the average Russian is about as well off as a Mexican. Okay, so that's the people that you're defending, John. They're about as rich as Mexicans, and they have more stuff to sell to people. So they should theoretically be a lot richer than Mexicans, but they're not. Because why? Because their culture sucks, number one, and number two, their economy is not built on good foundations. Obviously, the Soviet Union destroyed them in a big way, but generally speaking, they've always been behind the ball in terms of economic advancement, technological advancement compared to France, Germany, Britain, America. This has been the case for hundreds of years, actually. So he's completely wrong. And again, gas is getting more expensive. That's not even a big deal. In the grand scheme of things, that is next to nothing. It's like saying, well, the price of eggs went from 50 cents to an egg to $5 an egg. You would have to the egg be like $250 a pop for it to really change the economic ratio in terms of who's the richer country between America and Russia. So again, he's completely off on the numbers. So he has these like heuristics that are kind of true, but then when you look into them, they're factually incorrect.
Except that they're materially less well off than we are. But even that, I mean, you look at the gas prices and everything. If gas goes up, everything goes up.
It's $1.80 US right now per gallon in Russia.
Yeah, so whatever we have now to wave our finger at them,
it's $1.80 per gas in Russia. So it's not even as cheap as I thought originally. That's like, so basically their gas now is what it was during the very low point under Trump, right? So it's under $2. So that's probably like 30% of what it is here. Like it's like more than a third, but less than half of what it's cost here. How are they materially better off though? So the gas being 2.5 times more expensive in America still leaves us with being several times richer than the average Russian. And how does that work, genius? Seriously, who gives a fuck about the gas prices at this point? Like it doesn't make that big of a deal. I mean, difference economically.
Going to go away pretty quickly. The bottom line is that Russia, of course, is not perfect, but at the end of the day, Russia and China are nationalist and relatively traditionalist countries. And you'll say, well, they have higher abortion rates and they have higher HIV rates. That's happening in spite of Russia, right? Their government is not trying to orchestrate that from the top down like ours is. Our government has 2 official policies right now. One is official and has been for a while. One's on the way, that are some of the most like grotesque examples of tyranny I could ever imagine. You don't see this in Russia. You don't see this in China. One, it is the current position of the West, whether that's in the United States or Europe, to replace its native populations with mass immigration. That is the official policy. They don't have that in Russia.
Okay, that is kind of bullshit, okay? To say that the American government officially is letting in all these people to replace the white people is silly. Now, it is sort of happening by proxy, but it's not because the government is planning it that way. And even if it is, it's not like the government is some liberal monolith where they're going to constantly have this flow of immigrants coming in a way that is concerted and intelligent. Also, if that were the case, why is it that they even have any global restrictions on immigration to begin with, right? So obviously there's more nuance to it. They obviously have this long procedure to become a citizen. They have this big procedure about getting a green card, etc. So if they were so open to integration, wouldn't they just loosen that all up? And you might be like, well, the American people wouldn't vote for them. And it's like, okay, well, nigga, then what are you, like, anti-democracy now? Because it kind of, like, validates your position at this point. And even if it didn't, you look into it and, again, what's your big point? And in terms of, oh, well, the Chinese government and the Russian government isn't subverting the Russian people. Are you sure about that? When you look at the Chinese government in particular, they're worse than Russia. You look into that and they have this policy where they purposely limit the fertility of the women in China. How is that right wing? How is that not subverting them? And you might be like, and then he literally kind of hedged it by saying, well, they have higher abortion rates. So is that not subverting your own country when you're having these cheap, easy abortions for the women in China, when you have this universal healthcare system in China that incentivizes that, or at least makes it facilitates it for women in China? And oh, well, he might say, well, dang, well, didn't you know that they expanded the 1-child policy to 2-child policy per family? It's like, well, how about the infinite child policy? That's what we have in America. And sure, most people don't take advantage of it, but at least you have the right to do that. And the government doesn't pay for abortions for most people, at least. So there you go. They're literally paying for abortion in China with taxpayers' money, and they're also limiting you to only 2 kids per family. Now, they might have changed that rule more recently, but as of, the last several years, that's been the case. So they're subverting it in a very big way, and maybe they're not pushing gayness, but that's about it. That's basically what they have. They have more abortions. Their marriage rates are probably worse, and they have all this like atheistic, communistic sort of predilection and the sort of hero worship of Chairman Chow or Mao or whatever. And it's obviously the Chinese are way worse culturally than the worst of America, honestly. And that's hard to say because America sucks lately, but still, come on, way off.
Maybe they're all drunk, maybe they all are getting STDs, but at least they know that their descendants are more or less going to inherit the same country. Maybe it's a crappy country, materially speaking, but it's more or less the same country, whereas it is the official...
Who fucking cares? If you're in... Okay, so you care more about having your country be given down to your seed than actually living a good life here, right? So God forbid that we have a country where we take in 1 million immigrants a year, but we're all thriving, we're all conservative, and we all vote Republican. And then we have kids that are brown, and we have kids that might not look like us, but frankly, that's okay, right? But no, we can't have that. Instead, I'm John Doyle, I prefer, white people get STDs, get drunk, but, at least Russia is going to be inherited by other Russian alcoholic perverts. Oh, thanks, nigga. That's a really good idea, dude. Come on, get real.
Policy of America since 1965, and of Europe, broadly speaking, to replace the native populations with mass immigration from the third world. Secondly, the policy that's being worked on being totally implemented is where the state can say, well, you're not agreeing with your child's gender identity, so we actually have the authority to usurp you as the parents and know what is best for the child, and we can come and save that child, we can come and take them out of that bad situation.
Again, so the American government is not even doing this yet, really, but they're trying, the Canadian government, etc., are trying to limit parents' rights when it comes to the LGBT thing. And I agree with that, that's bad. But again, is the American government, is the Canadian government, is the German government limiting how many kids you can have? No. Is China? Yes. So come on, what is worse? Right? Also, inherent with like the whole the government stopping you from stopping your kids from transitioning, if you raise your kids right, that shouldn't even become an issue to begin with, right? So I don't even care. Even if they implement the rule, my kids are not going to be fucked up enough or emo enough to be questioning their gender. And so a lot of these white suburban kids question their gender, and then you need daddy government to stop you from losing your parenthood over your kids. It's like, well, maybe don't have them be gay in the first place, and then maybe they won't think of chopping their dicks off. So come on.
Which anytime they talk about the child consenting, obviously it's because they want to rape your kids, but it's also because they like the child can never.
Okay, again with this like conspiracy stuff. Again, there's some truth to what he's saying, but this is not appealing to anybody who doesn't already believe everything he says. All right, I'm somebody who agrees with 85 to 95% of what he says, and I'm still kind of grossed out by what he's saying. Okay, so come on. Oh, the left is trying to rape your kids. Nigga, like, who is that appealing to? That's weird. Like, why would you even bother saying that? And of course, you don't even back it up. You're going to have another heuristic right here.
Consent, because it's a child. Something is always going to be fueling that. And if it's not the parent, it's going to be the media, it's going to be teachers. Someone's always going to be talking into their ear, telling them, oh, this is what you need to be doing. So when they're saying we want the child to be able to consent, that's just them wanting control over the child, to take that away from you. And if you don't have country, you don't have land, you don't have heritage, and not even going back, you don't even have a future, you don't have forward, you don't have your descendants, what left do you have? So yeah, Russia sucks. But you know what? As long as they are destabilizing and serving as the biggest impediment on the global stage to a satanic evil empire that is the United States, they have my full support. God bless Vladimir Putin.
That is so retarded, John. Come on. You're a satanic empire? Then just leave then. Really? You really think America is a satanic empire? Then just leave. If you have that low of a self-esteem or so low confidence in America, then just get the fuck out. Honestly. Like, why would you say that about your own country? Like, what respect do you have? Honestly, it's so immodest for you to go ahead and be like, oh, you're satanic and you're gay. It's like, well, no. Okay? America, despite its flaws, is still great. And I'm staying here. And I think that America could change for the better. Clearly, John has more of a cognitive dissonance when it comes to that, because if he really cared about America's future, at least I would hope that he would go ahead and be like, well, it's not satanic, it just has these elements that are in it. But no, he'll just go ahead and just throw it. Oh, the left, you see, the reason why they want this is because they want to rape your kids. And see, there was an Obama-funded insurgency and color revolution, and I'm not going to prove it. And also, I'm going to tell you about how the gas prices make the Russians richer than us. And I'm also going to tell you about how we need to, God bless Vladimir Putin. Like, why? Why? Dude, really? And then America's a satanic empire? No, it isn't. If anything, it's like a liberal, it's a decaying liberal power. But to say it's a satanic evil empire, how? And then the fucking irony of this guy to say, these leftists, they have a geopolitical understanding that Russia's a Saturday cartoon villain and that's super evil. Nigga, you just called America a satanic evil empire. How much more of a 7-year-old take can you have, dude? Get the fucking mirror in front of your head, dude. Come on. Wake the fuck up, John. Watch your own video again, over, and see, oh my god, I'm contradicting myself. Come on.
Whoa, hey, take it easy, big guy. Let's not blow things out of proportion here. And a lot of people will listen to this, how we went through the whole explanation, and they might understand why we're sympathetic to Russia, why we're against the globalist American empire and the global libtard menace, but they'll still see clips like that and they'll think that we're using almost endearing language to describe Putin or Xi Jinping because we secretly like them. We think they're aligned with us or something. Maybe they're more aligned with us than our own leaders are because they're not trying as hard to destroy us, but I think the real explanation of that is this. You look at China. They had their century of humiliation, a century of losing, of existing not proudly but pathetically, and now in less than a few generations, they're becoming a global superpower, if not the global superpower. Or you look at Russia, you look at a guy like Vladimir Putin, a guy who saw the collapse of the Soviet Union, something I believe he described as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And he sits back and he bides his time and he takes power and he starts to slowly get things on the right track by his standards, just like by Xi Jinping's standards, China's getting on the right track. And the point is this, we're entering our period of humiliation. We are 1990s Russia. The same way that some girl breaks your heart, you cry about it, but then you use that vision of yourself in a pathetic state to start lifting weights and bettering yourself. We have been flying too close to the sun for too long. Maybe it's our fault, maybe it's someone else's fault, it's nonetheless true. The same way it took China 100 years to rise, they were humiliated, defeated, raped, literally by Japan. They were balkanized by warlords, they had famines and communist genocides. Now here they are. And because we all know the cycle that things are going to get worse before it gets better, maybe this is the way that ends up happening. Maybe as bizarre as it sounds, maybe Russia needs to win so that the West can see defeat and then learn from it, because no one can learn from comfort or stagnation, which is what we have now.
Okay, so now he's saying that he implicitly supports Russia because if we lose on the global stage, it'll humble America and it'll make America learn from its mistakes. What exactly? Last time I checked, if Ukraine isn't a big deal and people don't really care and they're just virtue signaling and we lose in Ukraine, they're just going to turn off the news and they're just going to go on to the next story. They're not going to learn anything. The people that believe what they believe are set in that way in a large extent, and they frankly are not going to change their mind when it comes to America not being in the right and Russia being in the wrong, even if America loses the war, because they all inherently understand that America could have deployed troops, that we could have bombed Russia if we wanted to, but we didn't. So they already have that cognitive dissonance. So anytime that you're going to say, oh, it's because America's stupid and incompetent that we lost Ukraine, they're not going to believe you, first of all. So you're not convincing anybody with that, John. And to say that that I'm the like okay, so you're basically wanting America to suffer because you want the leaders to understand what they did wrong and that they're gonna change it. They're not. You know, in a couple months, if and when Russia completely, you know, wins and Ukraine capitulates and we have the peace deals or whatever, Joe Biden is still going to be an unpopular president, but still president probably. So what is he going to change? Is he going to become more nationalist? I doubt it. So like what? What's the point? And again, you live in America. Do you want America to look stupid? Really, dude? Come on. So stop with the self-deprecating sense of your own nationality, okay? I think America ought to win insofar as I want America to succeed. I don't want it to lose. I don't believe in having us lose in the short term while wanting to win in the long term. You're basically doing what like Bill Maher said in 2018 when Trump was president, that he hopes that there's a recession so that the Democrats win the next election. And you're basically doing the same thing where you're like, well, I hope that we lose on this trivial matter so that we feel enough pain to fix things. And it's like, first of all, that's stupid. Second of all, that's not going to happen. And third of all, it's not going to happen, okay? We're not going to learn shit. The elites are not going to learn anything from antagonizing Russia because they already have all these copes lined up, okay? So you're not changing anything. The only difference being before Ukraine and after is that we're going to look stupid and that's it. That's literally it. We make an ass out of ourselves and we're going to keep supporting NATO. We're going to double down on the EU and we're going to hate Russia more than we did 5 years ago. So again, oh my God, John is so wrong about this.
From our Marvel fanboys, it's the only way, right? But in the same way that Russia's not like exactly winning, but more so that the West is losing because we're stupid, the right in this country isn't winning. It's just that the left is losing because it's stupid. And if we want to win, we have to act like it. But in the meantime, batten down the hatches, my fellow pirates, because it's going to get worse from here. And there doesn't appear to be anything good yet on the horizon for us.
Okay,
hey guys, if you like...
That is the whole reaction. I hope that was pretty in-depth for you guys. I personally think that John Doyle has good intentions, but he clearly just does not... he just doesn't fully get it, you know? And again, I'm being very picky. I know that I probably know more than most people, so I'm not trying to come off as a douchebag, but, you know, definitely he needs to look into things more. And it's not so much that he doesn't read about Russia, because he does. It's more so that he doesn't think through his own logic to the extent to which he would not be criticism-proof, and that's me. Okay, I'm criticizing him. I doubt that anybody's really thought of what he said this analytically, and not to toot my own horn, but I don't think Vaush has ever done this, and he's done a lot of reactions to John. This is probably the most hostile, negative reaction I've done, but it's only out of respect, because, you know, if I thought that John was stupid, I wouldn't bother debunking him, because, you know, he's stupid. But, you know, I think John is smart. I think John has an above average IQ. I think John is over 120 IQ, actually. He's a very smart guy. But there's some things he doesn't know. You know, he's young. He's only, what, like 22? So there's still things to figure out. Now, again, I am 18, so who am I to say? But definitely he does need to grow. Now, I'm only criticizing the parts that I know. There's probably more things I could have critiqued if I were smarter, but I'm not, so that is what it is. And, again, if John's watching this, I didn't really mean to offend you or anything. You know, like, I like his content. So, you know, I like John, but he's wrong on this one. And, you know, Nick is wrong on Russia. And I hope that more people realize, because, again, and I'll just give my position real quick. I think that the Ukraine thing is important because I think Ukraine is genuinely the victim despite its flaws. And I think that surrendering on the Ukraine when we already politically put our neck out for it makes us look stupid. And even if we look stupid and you think that that's going to make Joe Biden change the way he views the world, it's not. And it's not going to change anything for the better. So we might as well just win in Ukraine or salvage what we can and maintain our face so that when we do have another president that's good like Donald Trump or somebody down the line, we have something to salvage and not just hope and pray for the destruction of American hegemony worldwide so that we inherit some shithole in 4 to 10 years when we have a next conservative president. So anyways, that's my whole video. Thank you guys for watching. Comment down below what you think and if I should keep doing reaction videos. Anyways, I am gone. Comment down below. Like I said, bye.